Do you ever wonder how a successful real estate investor analyzes a deal and figures out if this property is worth it? Well, I was in that exact same position and had the exact same question as you. And you do not need to worry because I have done all that research and all that work for you. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to look at a property from start to finish with some real examples of real properties for sale. And with that, let's talk. So real estate has seemed to become a complete long shot for most people because simply put, they just don't know how to analyze a property. There's so many numbers, there's so many complex terms, but people really don't know how to sit down and analyze a property. With all the data, it can be so confusing, but not anymore. Today, I'm gonna walk you through step by step and show you how easy it is to see if a property is worth buying. Okay, let's start with the basics first. Analyzing a property is not hard and only requires a few steps. But let's get to that in a minute because there are a few key terms that you absolutely must know before getting started. First term, hugely important, is called ROI, or your return on investment. Now, my very first property, it was not the best deal in the world. I did overpay for it. And at the time, I really didn't understand how to analyze a property the correct way. And I didn't realize that return on investment was huge, and that's something you need to calculate. But thankfully for me, I did have mentors that I actually listened to, and they were able to help me walk through how to turn this property around and make it a little bit more profitable. So what is return on investment? Well, according to Investopedia, it is a performance measure used to evaluate the efficiency or profitability of an investment or compare the efficiency of a number of different investments. ROI tries to directly measure the amount of return on a particular investment relative to the investment's cost. Now, that was a big definition, sounds confusing, but here it is very simple. You want to take your net profit and you want to divide it by the amount of the investment that you put in. You take that number and multiply it by 100 and you now have a percentage of your ROI. Let's do a quick example. If you buy a house and your down payment is $40,000 and in a few years you sell it and now you walk away with $60,000, well, your net profit is $20,000. You take that $20,000 and you divide it by your original investment, which was the $40,000. You take that and multiply it by 100 and you have made a 50% ROI, or return on investment. Another key term is called the cap rate. Now, this is something that definitely confused me at first in the beginning when I was learning all these terms because I couldn't figure out what it was used for, why was it good? Does it matter? Should I even really care? I heard so many opinions. And yes, you should care about it. It's not the most important, but it still matters. So what is the definition of the cap rate according to Investopedia? It is to indicate the rate of return that is expected to be generated on a real estate investment property. Again, this sounds confusing and it sounds like you're trying to predict the future of an investment property, which you kind of are. But here it is broken down. Let's say you bought a property that is gonna be worth around $600,000. And every year your net profit is $20,000. You take that $20,000 and you divide it by that $600,000, multiply by 100, and in this case, you would get 3.3%. And that is your cap rate. But a good typical cap rate should be right around 5 to 10%. That's what most experts are gonna say is solid. Now, a few more terms that we all should know. Most of us probably have heard these terms before and they know it, but just in case you haven't, here you go. Gross and net profit. There is a difference. Your gross profit is going to be purely just how much money you have brought in before any expenses paid, while your net profit is going to be after all your expenses are paid, but before you pay taxes. But you really shouldn't be having taxes, should you? Another set of terms is income versus expenses. Income is just simply the amount of money you bring in, generally through rent, but it can also be in the form of equity gain when you sell a property. Expenses are just simply money that is going out every single month and year. Good examples are your mortgage, taxes, homeowners insurance, and things like that. And finally, if you're going to be doing any kind of rental properties, you need to know the term leases. A lease is simply a binding contract between a landlord and or a owner and a tenant or tenant saying that that tenant or tenants can occupy your unit. All right, now knowing some of the most important terms when it comes to analyzing a rental property, let's dive a little deeper. Let's start to walk through the process of how you even do this. What does this whole process look like? And let me tell you, when I first started, it looked so confusing. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know where to begin. Who do I even talk to about this? You think you would want to talk to, your CPA or other real estate people, but a lot of times people just don't want to give you information. So I'm going to give you all the ins and outs, the do's and don'ts of how to analyze a rental property. Just a side note, please remember, this process comes before you buy the property, not after. Don't make the mistake that I did and try to do this after you buy a property. That is just an easy way for you to lose money, and no one wants to lose money. Okay, the very first thing that you want to start doing is you want to start collecting all of the data about the property. You want to collect things like the purchase price, down payment needed, current rent amount, current market rent, what are the current expenses per year on the property, taxes, insurance, is there an HOA, and if so, how much? This is the most basic information that you're going to need to start to analyze a property. For me, I like to use a spreadsheet. It's digital, it's easy to access. I can access it on the go if needed. But if you're a little bit more old school, or if writing things down is an easier way for you to learn, then by all means do that. Once you have all that data and all that information collected, we now have to organize it to make it make sense. You want to start by analyzing the return on investment and the cap rate. For return on investment, or ROI, as we're going to call it in this video, everyone kind of has their own opinions on what a good percentage is. Some people will say 20, some people will say 30, some people want higher, some people want lower. But if you're trying to focus on a rental property and cash flow, ROI is not the most important thing right now. Because this property is mainly going to be used for cash flow, you're not trying to sell it, so you don't need an instant ROI. Now, you do want to make sure you still don't overpay for the property and it cash flows. Now, if you are trying to sell the house quickly, let's say you just need the cash or that's the style you like, then for me, I'm going for at least a 25 to 30% ROI. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. But the cap rate, on the other hand, as mentioned, a good rule of thumb is anywhere from 5 to 10%. So if you're aiming for that, then that is a great cap rate, and you know that this property could be a good investment. But this is not all that you want to look at. There's a few other things. You really want to know the rental history for that property. You're trying to gather as much information about current and past tenants that you can. If you can see that this rental property is easy to rent, it rents out for 2-3 years at a time, they pay at or above market rent, then you know that the area is good, renters are good, tenants are good, then this is a good thing to check off and say, okay, we have another win for this property. But on the other hand, if you have a property where tenants don't stay longer than a few months and they're struggling to pay rent, they don't pay on time, they tear up the house, then maybe the area is just not conducive for renting. The name of the game in real estate is being consistent. Okay, another huge point is location. Now, y'all have heard me talk about this in my videos before, but location is huge. You want to look at the potential school systems, potential jobs in the area, how is the city growing, see how the real estate market is doing, is it appreciating, is it too fast, because too fast can be bad, because if it goes up too fast, it can come down just as fast. Is the city booming? Is there a lot of growth in the area? Do people want to live there? All of these things matter immensely when analyzing a rental property. And again, these are all the questions that you want to ask before you buy, not after. Okay, now we're going to take a look at a real world example of a triplex that I found in my local area, and let's analyze to see, is this a good investment or is it bad? Okay, so here's a nice property, right? It's a triplex, it's near the LSU campus, so you know the tenant location is gonna be good. It's a location that is gonna be booming, it's gonna stay booming. There's a lot of money that is poured into this area all the time. So let's look at these numbers, see, is it good or is it bad? So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna plug this purchase price into a mortgage calculator, and I'm gonna see what does this actual mortgage look like, because from there, we're gonna start to develop our cap rate and our ROI for the unit. So as you can see, this purchase price is $539,000, and let's just assume that that is the purchase price, that it appraises for that, and that's what we're gonna get in contract for. So I'm gonna head over to my favorite website, Bankrate. You can use whatever sites you like, but I love this one because it's very simple. So again, the purchase price is $539,000. Typical down payment is 20 to 25%. Let's assume that we are going to do a normal 25% down, 30-year term. Now the interest rate right now for conventional investment property loans is right around 8%. So let's go with that. So as of now, it looks like The mortgage, including your tax and the insurance, is going to cost you right around $3,300, almost $3,400 a month. And according to the listing, there is no HOA fee, so that is huge. So let's assume that this is your monthly payment, and we're not going to include any expenses yet. We're going to just simply go mortgage, and we'll include expenses in a moment. So according to this listing, there are 3 tenants that currently occupy. One of them is $1,000 a month, the other is $1,300, and the third one is $900 a month. If you add all that up, it's $3,200 a month in rent brought in. So right off the bat, we can already tell that this property does not cash flow. So immediately I stop there and I don't even go any further, because there's no way that this property can cash flow unless you put so much money down. So I plugged in some numbers, and as you can see, I had to go up to 35% down just to kind of get it to cash flow. And this is not even including expenses. So this property right here, immediately I would stop and I wouldn't go any further. But for the sake of this video, let's continue on, get the ROI, let's get our cap rate, and we'll break it down even further. So for a cap rate, you really need a net to be able to even calculate the cap rate. So let's see what happens if we input a negative amount. So if the mortgage is $3,387 and you're bringing in $3,200 every month, that leaves you with a negative $187 in negative cash flow every month. And if you times that by 12, that's around $2,244 a year that you're losing. So to calculate the cap rate, you would have to take that number and divide it by how much you think the property is going to be worth, which in this case, they're saying $539. And if you try to enter that into your calculator, that's what you get right there. It shows you 0 because it's negative. It's not a good return on investment. You can't make any money. So let's say we put 40% down to make this example try to seem better, so I can walk you through it. So let's say now we've done 40% down, and let's say we just really want to put 40% down on this property, and the mortgage, it looks a little better, a little bit under $2,800. So we take the $3,200 that we're making and we subtract it from the $2,700, and we're left with around $407 in positive cash flow every month, which means at the end of the year, you're left with almost $5,000 in positive cash flow. So you take that number and you divide it by how much the house was worth. So if you plug in the numbers, you'll see that the cap rate is not even 1%. And if you remember, I want you to get a cap rate of between 5 and 10. Anything lower than that is not good. With that cap rate formula, with the percentage, that's gonna be the percentage of your investment return. So the higher the number, the better. So as you can see, this property is not even at 1% cap rate, which means it's a bad investment and you should not go for it. But there's something else big that you really need to know about investment properties. There's so many things that I could tell you that I can't include in one single video. So if you want to know what you need to do before you start investing, click on this video right here and I guarantee you, you'll learn something you didn't know was possible.